Let me start with a quiet update that almost nobody is talking about, but it should immediately change how you think about your LSAT timeline. On your official LSAT score report, LSAC has added a new field. It's labeled the Writing Ability Score. Now, I want to be very clear right away here. This does not mean the writing sample is scored today. If you're taking the LSAT in February or April or June, or you took it back in January, nothing is changing for you overnight. LSAC has not made any announcements, there have not been any press releases, no official rule change. But LSAC is not redesigning their score reports casually. They're not adding a field to the score report unless they expect some data to live there eventually. And once you understand why that field exists and what problem LSAC and law schools are trying to solve, the takeaway becomes pretty clear. If you can reasonably be ready to take the LSAT, taking it before LSAC starts scoring the writing sample is one of the cleanest ways you can reduce your LSAT and admissions uncertainty, reduce your risk, and avoid being a guinea pig or one of the first groups taking the LSAT under a brand new scoring system. So today I want to walk you through what is actually changing with the LSAT, why law schools want the writing sample to be scored, how a score writing sample would really be used, and how to protect yourself either way with a simple plan. Now, this is not speculation. Over a year ago, LSAC said publicly on their website, you can see this for yourself, that the LSAT writing would remain unscored in the short term, but they are analyzing the writing for validity and reliability with a long-term goal of providing a scored LSAT writing assessment that schools can use for admissions. Now, validity and reliability are prerequisites for scoring. They are not spending years analyzing those factors unless they are deciding whether it can be scored defensively. Now, LSAC has done a couple of important things over the past few years to this goal. First, they redesigned the writing sample. It is now argumentative writing. Secondly, they standardized the format, and they provide proctoring for it online as well. And they integrated writing directly into the logistics of the LSAT. In fact, you cannot get your LSAT score released unless there is an approved writing sample already on file. And now, of course, the latest change is they're adding a placeholder for the writing score to the score report. So this tells us where they're heading with this. Now, law schools have been pushing for LSAC to score the writing sample for quite some time now because application essays can be polished easily with AI like ChatGPT. And so admissions is asking, does your writing ability under pressure match the writing in the rest of your file? Because the timed and proctored writing sample is the only place they can be certain that you're writing with no outside help. And it is easy to compare one to another because they're all in the same format. And that gives law schools that credibility check. Now, a scored writing sample is not going to be another arms race like the multiple choice LSAT score itself, but it will still give context, and it could help break ties when applicants cluster around similar LSAT scores and GPAs. And the most important use would be as a consistency filter, especially when they have concerns about your writing ability if, for example, you are a non-native English speaker. And if your personal statement looks polished and your writing sounds like a totally different person when it comes to the writing sample, that will create some doubt. That will give them some uncertainty. And even if LSAC rolls this out carefully, which I hope they will, it'll still be messy because it's new and students won't know how much it matters. And so during transitional periods, people predictably overcorrect. Some students are going to over-prepare for it and neglect the scored multiple choice portions of the LSAT being logical reasoning and reading comp. Others are going to ignore writing entirely, and their samples are going to be kind of sloppy. And that uncertainty, that variability is the real enemy. And so you avoid all of this by just taking the LSAT before they implement the scoring of the writing sample. Now, there's one quick clarification here that matters. LSAC decides whether writing is scored, but law schools get to decide how much it matters. And so even once LSAC introduces scored writing samples, law schools will still likely use it cautiously at first, just as context. And the good news for you is that law schools won't care which version of the LSAT you took, with scored writing or without scored writing, just like during the transition away from logic games. Some people applied with logic games prior to the removal. Others applied with logic games after the removal, and law schools didn't care. They're not going to penalize you for whichever version of the LSAT you took. Now, I'm recommending, all else being equal, to try to be done with the LSAT before the change because changes always introduce uncertainty, but taking the LSAT earlier is not a good move for everybody. You should not rush to take the LSAT if your practice tests are still wildly fluctuating, if you're missing questions because you don't understand the arguments, or if you're still building the core fundamentals. In those cases, not good to take the LSAT early, not a strategic move. The writing change does not outweigh a weak LSAT score ever. A couple points lower on your LSAT will cost you far more in scholarship money than avoiding the writing transition would save you. But taking the LSAT earlier could be smart given a few prior factors or prerequisites. So first, if your practice test range is already close to your goal, you might want to take it sooner. If you have time for one focused refinement cycle, meaning there is one specific weak area that you can address before you take it, it's a go. And third, if you can complete the writing early enough that your score release wouldn't be delayed. If all of those are true, taking it earlier is a good move. And the good news is that if you took the LSAT prior to the upcoming change, you won't have to redo the writing. They will not retroactively invalidate your score that was valid under the published rules when you took the test. And your LSAT score remains valid for 5 years. Just like if you took the LSAT before they removed logic games, they're not making you redo the LSAT without logic games. You get to choose which format you take. If you plan ahead now, you're in a relatively fortunate position. It's a good place to be. Now, when it comes to the writing sample, law schools are not looking for beautiful, polished Shakespearean prose here. They're looking for your ability to make a structured, coherent argument. They want to see that you can take a position, you can support it logically, you can, though, acknowledge the other side, and you can communicate clearly under time pressure. So good writing means you state your thesis clearly and early in your intro paragraph. Your reasoning is easy to follow. You have structured paragraph breaks that each do one job, and the tone of your writing matches the rest of your application. Ideally, you want to have good grammar and good spelling, but those are not the most important things here. Now, when it comes to writing, you need to have a repeatable structure. You've got 50 minutes in total, 50 minutes. 15 of those are for pre-writing and taking notes, 35 minutes for the actual writing. And so for your pre-writing, that's when you are picking a side, you are choosing 2 reasons to back it up, and if you can make a structured outline with your thesis, your first reason, your second reason, your strongest counter argument that you acknowledge, and then your rebuttal of that counter argument. And then, of course, you draft your topic sentences to give your reader a clear roadmap. Then in the actual writing portion, you write the full paragraphs that were laid in your outline. Target length should be roughly 400 words to make it meaty enough, but not overraw. Now, you don't want to try to sound impressive. You don't want to try to use big vocabulary words where you're not even sure what they mean. You don't want to ignore the evidence that they're giving you. You want to make use of it. And you don't want to overinvest on the writing at the expense of logical reasoning and reading comp, which will most likely remain much more important than the writing sample. Now, while writing sample is unscored for now, remember that they do plan to score it in the near future. They will probably start scoring it either in the second half of this year or the second half of next year, because new LSAT years begin in July of each year. So probably for the cycle beginning in July of this year, 2026, or if not, then July of 2027 will be when they start scoring the writing sample. But no matter what LSAC does next, the winning approach remains the same. Now, you don't need to predict LSAC's timeline. You just got to have a plan where their decision doesn't change your outcome. Either way, you know what to do.